All right, welcome back. This is our study of the lectures on faith. Well, first try the spirits, in which we're going to walk through the spirits and kind of take a rigorous analytical, philosophical approach to it in an attempt to reflect on our own thought processes and what is governing our life. Last time when we met, I opened up with me making a sales pitch for philosophy and asking, let me see, why is John Morley? Sorry, I'm adjusting some things here. Sorry, technical difficulties. I made a sales pitch for philosophy and why we need it. And I kind of drew parallels to philosophy as in the art or practice of uncovering the hidden assumptions that govern your life, the axioms. And I drew a parallel to that to Joseph Smith's Try the Spirits talk, because he's doing the same thing. He's dragging out the spirits into the light so that we can understand why we are animated in a particular way, why we do the things we do. And that entire talk is about discerning those spirits through, well, trying them. And in that discussion, we talked a lot about thought processes that lead us into bad thinking, uncritical thinking, irrationality. We talked about correlation versus causation. We talked about falsifiability and the scientific method. And we talked about seeing patterns that aren't there in white noise. You can go review that if you'd like. But near the end there, we kind of ended off with Parker made some points about the temple, because keep in mind this entire Try the Spirits talk is given in response to some hooligans that occurred because of Nauvoo, right, Parker, or Kirkland? I get them mixed up. It was Kirkland, right?
Yeah, Kirkland.
Yeah, Kirkland. Because there's some shenanigans that happened after the temple experience at Kirkland. Because not everything that goes through the veil comes through the veil in the temple ordinance is necessarily good. And so you have to have the right mind to comprehend it, to conceptualize it, to make sense so it doesn't make you loony. And engage in weird practices. And Parker left it off. And I said, let's put a pin on that, Parker, and we'll talk about that next time, about the importance of ritual and ordinances in bringing a community together, and maybe temples serving not as a, because I think in our assumptions from the LDS culture, we view temples as the end all. That's the ultimate end we're trying to get to. And if we can get to the temple, we have our checklist marked off, and now we're going to gain access into the heavens because we'll know the passwords, secret words, right? Or something like that. We'll have the knowledge. And kind of implicit, Parker, in what we were talking about is the temple may be more of a pedagogical tool, a way of teaching us about the heavens, showing us a template of the cosmos. And perhaps we ought to kind of understand the temple in that way. It will help, so that our temple experience is, if we understand a temple like that, it is supposed to teach us. It will enhance our experience of a temple ordinance when we go through one. So the reason why we're doing this is to perhaps, hopefully, we're preparing our minds. It's the aim. We're trying to prepare our minds to think critically so that we could become prepared. We can have our minds prepared for a future temple experience, a future ritual, so we don't go crazy like they did in Joseph Smith's day. So with that, I want to, before we dive into the text, I kind of want to make another sales pitch for philosophy, why it's important to be able to know how to think. And I'm going to start with the very basics here about what thought is, what language is, and why we have words to describe certain phenomena. And that will lead into a discussion of why we may need shared rituals and a shared Christian way of life in order to ground our language into something. So where does language come from? Where do our words come from? What do our words mean? So questions to keep in mind. I learned this in my logic course, that, and this is really relevant to me as I've had a daughter. When you are born into the world, you don't have concepts. You don't know what a cat or a dog is. You don't know what a house is. You don't even have words yet. You can't really even perceive anything, especially before you come into the world and you're just in the embryonic state. When babies are born, they can't see things. They can kind of see like 6 inches in front of them, but it's all blurb of black shadows. And they told me this in the NICU, that your daughter, yeah, she can't really see you, but she can you're kind of a blob in her sense data. But what she's receiving as a baby is just raw sensory information of the world. Sights, sounds, everything, but it's not differentiated. It's just a buzzing blurb of confusion. And as the baby matures, she starts to differentiate this object from that object. She starts to be able to make sense. This is mommy. And mommy is not the same as the couch. That comes online slowly. It's a developmental process. And that's when sensations go to perceptions, where she's able to go from just raw sense data and she's able to perceive particular objects. And what allows someone to do that is the ability to differentiate between senses, between different sense data. Babies that are born premature in the NICU, their brains are exposed prematurely to a lot of sense data that they would not have received if they were in the safe embryonic interuterine walls of mommy. And when they are evicted out of the womb 12 weeks early, they are exposed to that. What happens to a baby when they are evicted out early is their brains normally would be wiring up properly, integrating so that they can make sense of all that sense data. But when it's getting bombarded too prematurely, they don't know what to make of all the sense data. And so what happens on a neurological level is the brain does not wire up properly. There's various regions of the brain. There's the sense region, the occipital lobe, the sensor, the hearing regions, and those need to get wired up to the region of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. That region is the sense meaning making part of the brain. When that doesn't get wired up properly, what happens, because if that doesn't get wired up properly because there's an overstimulation of sense data, babies don't wire that up, and later on in life they're not able to actually make sense of sense data, and they become autistic or ADHD. And so their response to normal stimulation that we would receive is to just start rocking back and forth or start banging their head because they can't compute the information, the sense data. And so that is occurring there. So sorry, tangent. So when you are born, a bunch of sense data, you need to know how to integrate it into percepts. That is a process. Okay? Then you go from percepts to something called concepts. Concepts are not the same thing as percepts. So you go sensation, percepts, concepts. Concepts are when you're able to keep the object in your mind's eye and remember it and differentiate it. So this is mom. Mom is not just an object. She is a class unto herself. She is the nurturer and provider. A dog is not the same thing as a cat. You start developing these concepts as you get older that differentiate them from different classes of creatures, different classes of objects. And the way we kind of track concepts in our mind is via language. We have words that attach to concepts. When kids go out, they see a dog, but if they don't have the concept for cat yet, because they've only been familiar with the family pet, they'll see a cat and they'll say, dog. No, child, that's not a dog, that's a cat. They haven't developed that concept yet. And so these concepts have to be taught to children, and it's an ongoing process. So, very, very basic. I know why are you talking about sensations, percepts, and concepts, Caden? It's because we build off of this. Is the basic. These are the foundations, and we build off of this because concepts become words. Words become sentences. We start adding different concepts together to make a sentence, and those sentences become theories and philosophies and ideas, and those matter. Not everyone has the same concepts. They went to the indigenous tribes in New Guinea, and they don't have a number system. When you ask, okay, so there's like a little shepherd boy, and he's letting the sheep out of the pen to go into the fields. And the anthropologist asked, how many sheep are in the field. And the shepherd boy says, this many. And he points to a pile of rocks. What he does is he just takes rocks, and when every sheep passes through the fence, they put a rock from this pile to that pile. But they don't count it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They don't have that concept of numbers. It's just rocks. So when you ask how many sheep are out there, this many, that many, they can't think in numbers. Concepts, numbers are not innate in your human psyche. They have to be taught. You have to be taught a number system. So not everyone has the same concepts. Some animals do have concepts, by the way. Ravens and crows. They did an experiment where a man would walk through the field into a house, and then and the crows, would leave while he's walking through the field, but come back after he left. But he'd notice if he took 2 people into the house and one person left the house and the other person stayed behind, the crows wouldn't come back down yet until the second person left. And then they try that with 3 people, and 2 people would leave the house and one person would stay, and the crows were able to count to 3. And they wouldn't come back down to the field until the third person left the house. But then after 4, once they got to number 4, if 3 people left the house, even though one person remained, the crows would come back down to the field. So birds have a conceptual framework for up to 3. It's 1, 2, 3, and then a blurb. So these matter. Why is this important? Because people have different concepts, and concepts are placeholders for things that language tags the concepts that organize your thought structures for how you experience and how you perceive reality. The average high school graduate has about 10,000 concepts in their mind. They can conceptualize 10,000 different things. College graduate, at least when education was good, typically around 25,000 different concepts. They can conceptualize the world in a different way. This comes into conflict when you interact with people who do not have the same conceptual framework as you, and then you're going to start equivocating and speaking past each other. Parker, yes, your hand is up.
Yeah, what were you talking about? Concept, it wasn't precept. It was
precepts are just the recognition of a differentiated object, but that object doesn't quite hold a class of itself in your mind yet. It doesn't become a concept.
Yeah, well,
Mother
both
as such.
both the term you were using with premature babies that come before concepts.
Senses. They have sensations.
Not it was concept, but I don't remember. I'll have to look at the recording.
It goes sensation, percepts, then concepts.
Percept.
Not precepts, perception. You perceive something, but it doesn't have an anchor in your mind yet as a differentiated thing. Yes.
So that reminds me of the correction we got to the Kirtland Temple vision in TNC 157. Right after Christ appeared and got to the Kirtland Temple, the Revelation says, the vision closed, the heavens were again opened to their view, and they saw and beheld, and were endowed with knowledge from the beginning of this creation to the end thereof. And they were shown unspeakable things from the sealed record of heaven, which man is not capable of making known, but must be revealed by the powers of heaven. They beheld Michael the archangel, Gabriel and Raphael, and divers angels, from Michael or Adam down to the end of time, showing in turn from the dispensation the right, the keys, and honor, the majesty and glory, and the powers of their priesthood, giving line upon line, precept upon precept, endowing them with knowledge, even here a little and there a little, holding forth hope for the work God was yet to perform, even the revelation of all things which are to come upon the earth, until the return of the Lord in glory with the holy angels, to pour out judgment upon the world and to reward the righteous. And here's the important part. And they were unable to take it in. Therefore, they were commanded to pray and ask to comprehend by the power of the Spirit, to bring all things to remembrance, even the record of heaven, which will abide in them. Amen and amen. So the idea that maybe we are kind of like premature babies spiritually, in the sense that we can receive things, but we are unable to take them take it in. And so
Yeah.
here we have to.
We're unable to properly conceptualize it. It's just sense
Yeah.
buzzing, confusion. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Actually,
Go ahead.
can I make just a quick connection? So,
Yeah.
preemie babies are kind of like the fall, conceptually. The fall was premature, and so you could argue that our experiences here in life are, in a sense, premature, just like you were describing, Parker.
Yeah.
And how
Well,
it connects to what you were saying.
we got to wire up properly so that we can receive more heavenly knowledge.
Yeah.
No, that's those are both really good insights. Yes, Taylor.
It might not be really related when you were mentioning the shepherd boy that didn't have the ability to count, just had the stones. It kind of reminded me of our language nowadays. I think we're more at the level of a shepherd boy, and if we were to have the Adamic language, we might be able to count. So,
like the heavenly, yes. Well,
Yeah.
okay, so think about what math enables you to do. It affords you the ability to step into the world of accounting, of calculus, of engineering. Language, when you have the proper concept, it allows you to participate in a world that wasn't previously accessible to you. This is why it's important. The whole premise, the whole theme of 1984, the book by George Orwell, is they start confounding the language so that they can remove the concepts of freedom and family and liberty. If you can't conceptualize what freedom is, because all you have the only thing you can relate to the world is bondage and slavery. When someone utters the word to you and says they talk about rights and freedoms, and you've been living in a totalitarian regime your whole life, or you're under the rule of Kim Jong-un, you have no idea what they're talking about. It is completely outside of your reality. But that's why you have to learn line upon line, precept upon precept, so you can start to conceptualize these things that are beyond your ability to take in. It is a process. Did you re-raise your Emily? Yeah.
Yeah. Our ability to conceptualize and use words to shape or to attach them to our thoughts is also linked to memory. There were, and I don't know if you were going to mention these already, Caden, but there were a couple real life examples of children who were found much, much later in life that discovered to have had a type of upbringing that they were completely away from language. Like one girl was found in the forest somewhere, having never seen a
Chicago. Her
human
parents
being.
kept her in a closet her whole childhood. Yes,
Yeah,
I know the study.
yeah,
Yeah,
and then,
keep going.
yeah, and that one. And they tried to teach these children when they were discovered, tried to teach them new language, teach them how to speak. And in one of the examples, that girl did learn a little bit, and she was able to start forming small sentences, but she couldn't say more than 5 or 6 words at once. She was incapable. Her brain had not developed those connections to be able to really grasp the language in the sense of grammar. And she was able to say after the fact that, like, when interviewed years later, she was saying that she couldn't really remember life before learning the language, before learning to speak. She had no memory. It was like a dream state that she was in, because she didn't have any language to attach to the events that happened in her life, and couldn't associate that together, couldn't then put it into words later. Her brain didn't cling on to those things.
Code it anywhere.
Yeah, you need the concept serves as anchor points for your memory. Yes.
Yeah.
No, really good insight. Yeah. Catherine.
What I consider as we're talking is we have to keep in mind that the English language is so inadequate. The language of the spirit is hard to grasp and bring into verbalization because we don't have that understanding, especially those of us who are predominantly English speakers. I remember that Bob, he wrote every morning in his study and communion with the Lord the truths, and he would verbalize to me or express in his writing that it was inadequately written because he did not have the ability to.
Didn't have the language.
Right. So as we're talking about this is what comes to mind. We as souls, we have our spirits that we can, when this veil of flesh is more transparent, it will be a wonderful, that's even a inadequate word. It will be remarkable to be able to communicate, and we won't need to use words or whatever. And I just think about this as we're talking about language and concepts and such.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point about the inadequacy of language, because your language, the English language, has to be grounded in a shared lived reality with other people. An example of this language gulf or language problem was discovered in there was this Russian scientist, and he wanted to he wore these things called the field space belt that would send electromagnetic vibrations through your body when you'd wear it that would orient you to magnetic north. It almost like awakened an inner vestibular system in you, and people became aware of magnetic north when they wore it, and it opened up a whole way of comprehending the world. They were able to kind of have greater spatial navigation in their memory by wearing this belt. But what they discovered when wearing the belt is that they didn't have words in English or in Russian to describe what they were experiencing, and so they couldn't communicate their experience to the experimenter, the scientists, but they could communicate it to other people who were also part of the experiments, who were also wearing the field space belt, by making up words about what they were going. They had because they had a shared experience, and so they had to make up words, but those words tagged the experience, tagged the concepts of this phenomenon of experiencing magnetic north. So weird. And then while I was reading this was David Eagleman's work, he's like, yeah, we can just all add attachments and become transhumanistic, and we would all have our own languages to talk about our own little sensory additions. And I'm ringing in my head, that's Babel to me. That's Tower of Babel. But there's something that points to this true, is that your language has to be grounded in actual concepts that are shared with other people. This, I believe, is what an ordinance offers, a ritual. The sacrament or a temple ordinance is the temple is communicating heavenly knowledge that is beyond your conceptual, perceptual, sensorial framework. And it's initiating you into that. You have to enter as a little child. And once you have that base, and you have that base with other people, that is what Taylor calls the Adamic language, the original language, hooks into. If you lose those rituals from a temple-centric civilization and you're ripped from it, you don't have the shared framework with the heavens to actually talk about the reality. So you become disconnected. Yes, Adam, your hand's up.
Yeah, I was just going to make the connection to that, the thing about the electromagnetism. So music actually works the same way when you are developed enough with the language of music, because it is a language that you learn how to speak. You can start to communicate with others who speak that language only in concepts that music is able to explain. And my experience with the piano, more specifically, unless you are already familiar with like being able to sit down and play certain chords and certain melody fragments and do certain rhythmic patterns and certain like just very specific things, unless you already know how to do that, you won't understand what is being communicated when someone else is just able to come in and just like riff on whatever you're doing, or be able to like participate because they speak the same language. And so you start to recognize that certain concepts are this thing, and certain concepts is this little melody thing, right? And you don't really have words for that. And then if you want to try to explain it in English or in any traditional language, you then have to like think about the best way that you could convey that idea with words. And it's actually very similar to how I think of like the vision of all experience might be, and like how could you possibly convey any of that in the most accurate language possible? I don't think it is possible, because you're tapping into ideas, or you're tapping into concepts that are by nature, they each concept is so much more vast than our simple language could ever describe. And anyway, music is a
No.
piece of that.
Well,
It's
the thing is,
a
you
type
have a
of that.
fellowship of musicians, and you can communicate those concepts with your fellow musicians.
Yes, with the language
Just
of
like,
music between them. Yeah.
yes, just
No
like if you
words
have a
for
fellowship with
specific
angels, you can
music.
communicate these heavenly concepts with angels. That's why we need a fellowship, and the fellowship can't just be mere exchanging of semantics, which ironically is what we're doing. A fellowship has to be a shared way of life so that the language can actually take root in community, in a ritual way, in the Christian ritual way, a liturgy. That's why the Christian Orthodox Church has a liturgy. They have certain things they celebrate in the cyclical cycle of the year. And so everyone is participating in that narrative that takes place around the resurrection year by year. And that informs their language. So they're all on the same page conceptually, because they're all on the same page participatorily. So, yeah. So that's kind of what we're going to dive into. I want to make one more plug here for what the role of philosophy does for this when you're dealing in the realm of abstract conceptions. Because we're man and we can conceptualize things with language, dogs don't do this, lower creatures don't do this, they don't have rational faculties. We do this. And because we do this, that's a huge plus for humans, but there's a downside. We're very prone to deception. That's why we have to actually, not everything that comes from heaven or through the veil is good. We have to have discernment in testing it. So I want to talk about this idea of conceptual bundling before we go into the text. Conceptual bundling is when you accept things uncritically, and you view them as you take a bunch of things that are okay. Let me give an example of conceptual bundling. Compassion. You take ideas of compassion, the whole concept of what it means to be a compassionate person. Quite often in political discourse, compassion gets bundled in with communism. Maybe not communism, social democracy. And what happens is compassion gets bundled with redistribution of wealth. But what's the premise under redistribution of wealth? You're going to take something by force and give it to someone else using the legal arm of the government. And so you have something that is compassionate, this idea of giving from the gift and freedom of your heart because you love someone, bundled in with this idea of robbing from other people. You're quite literally having justice rob mercy, because to give something from your heart is mercy. When you're forced to give something from your heart for social justice, you're robbing mercy. Your idea of social justice has just robbed my mercy, because now I can't give mercifully from my heart, so I'm not really practicing charity. But anyways, those different concepts of charity, compassion, and taking things by force to redistribute it get bundled together. Those are two different ideas that get bundled together in this idea of communism, of social democracy. And then what happens is, to be a good person and to be someone who's compassionate and kind means you must accept social democracy, or communism, or whatever its tenets are, whatever its iterations are. And if you're not, that gets bundled in the minds of new liberals. Compassion, and if you are pro-business, pro-free market, you're a monster because you're not compassionate. And so those get bundled together. And part of being philosophical is being able to, what I just did is to deconstruct it, cut through those conceptual bundlings, those different ideas that get clumped together. Another example I shared in that video on the Discord, the recording, I talked about the healthcare system, where a lot of medical workers have been crammed down their throat that they are public servants. They need to be servants to the patients. The actual definition of service is trading of a service for a good. I'll read a quick account on this. What does service actually mean? The concept of service has been turned into a collectivistic package deal by means of crude equivocation and a cruder evasion. In the language of economics, the word service means work offered for trade on a free market, to be paid by those who choose to buy it. In a free society, men deal with one another by voluntary, uncoerced exchange, by mutual consent to mutual profit, each man ensuring his own rational self-interest, none sacrificing himself for the others, and all values, whether goods or services, are traded, not given away. This is the opposite of what the word service means in the language of altruistic ethics. In the altruist, service means unrewarded self-sacrifice, unilateral giving, while receiving nothing in return. It is this sort of selfless service to society that collectivists demand of all men. One of the grotesque and that becomes a package deal for doctors. And that's a problem, because once you start attaching service to, I have to live for the other person, especially in the medical field, you start to package those things together. That opens the door for Medicare, Medicaid, state mandate to take over the medical institution, and doctors are no longer free traders anymore. Anyways, okay, sorry, I'm going on a tangent here a little bit about that. But the point I want to make about these conceptual bundling is, quite often in political spheres, in political arenas, people will bundle concepts to you and try and feed it to you. You must accept my doctrine or ideology, or you're a bad person. Here's a silly example of a conceptual bundling. Be a good boy and eat your vegetables. You have just bundled in being a good boy with eating your vegetables when you tell your kids, or be a good boy by going to sleep. Luckily, your kids don't take logic, and they say, that's a question-begging epithet, Mom. Another example of that is, Adam, are you still a jerk? Or are you still a lazy slob? As you were in high school? When someone asks you that at a party, they are bundling. That's called a complex question. They are asking you. They are forcing you to accept the premise that you were a slob in high school. Maybe you weren't, and that's a sneaky trick. They've bundled in those concepts. So to be able to think critically.
A better question would be, Adam, can Mom know you're gay?
Yeah. Those are fun party tricks, but those are complex questions. Those are concepts that are bundled together. I would say the same thing applies with spiritual matters too. You get a bunch of ideas, bunch of spirits bundled together. And sometimes you need to think critically. Sometimes righteousness needs to kick virtue's ass every now and then. You need to separate that. So that is why we need to think philosophically about these things. We need to think critically so that we can have discernment, because not everything that comes to us in the package deal those can be unpacked and questioned. So one last thing, and then we'll get started. In any issue, it is the most consistent of but nobody is as okay. You cannot win by conceding to the enemy's premises. So when you answer the question, Adam, does your mom know you're gay? And you choose to engage in that dialogue, you've just accepted your adversary's premise that you are gay.
Right, so the correct answer is to not answer.
Yeah, the question is to step back and say, I don't accept your premises that I am gay. Let's go check those premises. In any issue, it is the most consistent of adversaries who wins. One cannot win on the enemy's premise because he is then more consistent of all one's efforts to serve only to propagate his principles. So you're going to get bombarded in life with package deals, conceptual bundling. To be a critical thinker, you need to step back and say, I don't accept your premises. Let's explore those premises. Then we can have a conversation. Let's talk about me being gay or not, or if I was ever a jerk. So we'll do that in spiritual matters as well into this text. All right, so let's okay, that was my plug for philosophy and critically thinking. So let's dive into the text now. Parker, would you be able to read TNC 147.5, and would you be my Jamie and share your screen?
Yeah, sure. Just to let you guys know, I'm gonna have to leave in about 15-20 minutes.
Okay.
And I'm gonna be attending church with my folks.
You are serving two masters. That is you have bundled in two different concepts together in your life.
I am honoring my father and my mother.
Okay, there you go. You reject my premise.
Yeah, Parker said, I don't accept your premise. We won't talk about that.
All right. What paragraph are we on?
We are on paragraph 5.
5. All right. Oh, good. This is good because I actually watched a movie about the shaker last Christmas. Okay.
All right.
The shaker will whirl around on his heel, impelled by a supernatural agency or a spirit, and think that he is governed by the Spirit of God. And the jumper will jump and enter into all kinds of extravagant goods. A primitive Methodist will shout under the influence of that spirit until he will rend the heavens with a cry, while the Quaker, or friend, moved as they think by the Spirit of God, will sit still and say nothing. And God, the author of all this, if not all of it, we should be recognized. Surely such a heterogeneous mass of confusion can never into the kingdom of heaven. Every one of these professes to be competent to try his neighbor's spirit, but no one can try his own. And what is the reason? Because they have not a key to unlock, no rule wherewith to measure, and no criterion whereby they can test it. Can anyone tell the length, breadth, or height of a building without a rule? Fix the quality of metal without a criterion, or point out the movement of the planetary systems without knowledge of astronomy? Currently not. And if such ignorance like this is manifested about in a spirit of the kind, who can describe the angel light? If Satan should come appear as long as glory, who can tell his color? His sign, his appearance, his glory, what is the manner of his manifestation? Who can detect the spirit of the French prophet within revelations and visions and power and manifestations? And who can point out the spirit of the earthlingite within her apostles and prophets and visions and tongues and interpretation, etc., etc.? And who can drag into daylight and develop the hidden mysteries of the false spirit that so frequently are made manifest among the latter-day saints? We answer that no man can do this without the priesthood and having a knowledge of the law by which the Spirit can govern. For as no man knows the things of God but by the Spirit of God, so no man knows the things of the devil and his power and his influence. But by possessing intelligence which is more than human, and having unfolded through the medium of the priesthood the mysterious operations of his devices, without knowing the angelic form, the sanctifying look and gesture, and the zeal that is frequently manifested by him for the glory of God, together with the prophetic spirit, the gracious influence, the godly appearance, and the holy garb, which is so characteristic of his proceedings and mysterious windings. A man must have the discerning spirit before he can drag into daylight the intelligent influence and unfold it onto the world in all its soul-destroying, diabolical, and horrid colors. For nothing is a greater injury to the spirit of men than to be under an influence of a false spirit when they think they have the Spirit of God. Thousands have felt the influence of the terrible power and baneful effect. Long pilgrimages have been undertaken, penitence endured, and the pain, misery, and ruin have followed in their train. Nations have been convulsed, kingdoms overthrown, provinces laid waste, and blood, carnage, and desolation are garments in which they have been clothed. The Church, the Hindus, the Jews, the Christians, the Indians, in fact, all nations have been deceived, imposed upon, and ancient with the mischievous effects of false spirit.
All right, Parker. I'm going to ask you the question since you have to leave sooner. I'll have you answer first. What is Joseph Smith's epistemology here? How do you discern? How do you know?
Well, he said you have to have the discerning of spirit before you can drag into daylight. Where is it? He taught the quality. Oh yeah. No man can use without the priesthood, and having a knowledge of the laws by which spirits are governed. But by possessing intelligence, which is more than human.
Mm-hmm.
So he got the epistemology is the foundation from the Spirit of God, which allows him to discern what is correct and what is not, rather than just appealing to religious authority. I know that this particular church is true. Therefore, if things go outside my framework of the church, then it's false. It's rather beyond that.
I'll push you on that. What is because you said he's using the intelligence. A man needs an intelligence, possesses intelligence as more human. That almost seems like an appeal to mysticism. It's beyond human capacity. It's beyond that. So can you describe then, describe what that thing beyond human intelligence, what is the epistemology of that thing beyond human intelligence? How does that thing beyond human intelligence know? How does it discern? What is its epistemology?
I would say it's a fellowship. I'm not sure if I'm understanding correctly, but I would say it's a fellowship because he's describing. One thing I know that he uses the word color quite frequently in
Who can tell us color? Yeah.
he talks about his color, and later on in the section he'll talk about if angels have a certain type of hair color, you'll know they're false spirit. But he talked about the color, the gesture, his appearance, his signs. So it seems like the supernatural agency is more than human. It's not just beyond you mysterious. It's actually you are in actual fellowship or connection with someone from beyond the veil.
Well, okay, I'll add to that then, because that can get taken up by mystical thinkers. I just know. And why do I know? Because I have this intelligence in me that is telling me so. And so trust me. I have a spiritual gift and I can woo-woo. In here, he's describing the criteria of what this super intelligence that is above human intellect can comprehend. He's laying it out here. It's not a heterogeneous mass of confusion. There's actual, when I say epistemology, there is a way of knowing that's not just subject to intuition or subject to just feeling. It can be given, it can be communicated and given an account. So this thing that you are in fellowship with that is the Spirit of God, does give you a key to unlock. It helps make things discernible. There is a measure, a criterion to test it. It's not just untestable, unfalsifiable claims that this intelligence is giving you, but there is a criteria. So it's communicate. Like we talked about last time, intelligibility and intelligence. Intelligibility means things are differentiated. There is a standard that you can measure things to orient you, to orient your understanding. That is baked in there. That's the epistemology of this intelligence. Does that make sense, Parker? My pushbacks to you? It's not just mere association with heavens that grants you the knowledge of things, but what I'm digging at is how does that intelligence from heaven help you to know something is of God or not of God?
Right.
Yes. Okay, Adam, your hand's up.
Yeah. Oh, I'm unmuted. Yeah, so we've actually kind of already touched on these ideas previously, so I guess I'm just bringing back into remembrance stuff from a couple minutes ago to 20 minutes ago or so.
That means
It's
you have
about
concepts that are working.
yeah, it's about the participation in, not just the knowing about or being a casual observer of. It's about you need to actually be playing the music with the musicians in the jam session in order to speak the language and
Mm-hmm.
then learn together to recognize certain things. And so I think like in the case of trying the spirits, I honestly it sounds to me with all these ideas swirling together, it's more like you need to be participating in fellowship with God, and acting these things out in order to know the difference between someone who is acting genuinely with the proper spirit and someone who has or I guess I'm equating this with spirits as well, a spirit that has a genuine recognizable familiar presence versus one that has maybe a hidden motive or is not 100% truthful or is not manifesting in the way that you would expect it to because of your prior experience in that. And so if anything is uh, like the idea of like when you meet when you're dating or something and you're trying to find your spouse or something and this idea of like red flags, like you need to know by experience what flags are red and how to avoid those, which comes from the participatory knowledge. And so I think
You can learn from other people.
yeah, by your experience with people, or in this case, by your experience with spirits, hence try the spirits, so that I think try in the case of the title of try the spirits, not it's almost like it's capturing multiple different ideas at once. It's not just put on trial, but it's also like try them, like because you need to know which spirits are actually good and which ones are evil, and um, and so it's like it's almost like a play on words. At least that's how I kind of view it. So again, it he's saying engage and learn. And by the way, the proper way to be able to discern is with priesthood, which means with fellowship, with association. And so if you are associated with angels or those that come with messages from God, and you know how they operate and what the operations of God are because of participation, which could take, decades and decades of experience for most of us. Then if you don't have that, then you might not be able to recognize when one is not of the same cut from the same cloth. And so you need to. I think he's directly making the correlation that it's not just about the knowledge of priesthood. It's not just about priesthood as like oh, we need to connect with the mind of God. It's more about literally participating, and maybe even being an angel yourself to others, right? Like you need to
So
know what it looks like
yeah, I
by
like that. I'm going to
experience.
respond to you now. Let Taylor, because he has his hand raised, talk. Um, I like how you bring the language of participation, and trying. And I'll tie this back to epistemology, how you come to know something. Uh, there is two ways of thinking in philosophy when it comes to ethics. It's called a priori, meaning you do it in your head, you just think about it, and you use logical deductions to make sense. And then there's a posteriori, meaning you get off your posteriori, your butt, and you go into the world and enact, and that's how you derive your conclusions. And those stem the rationalist and the empirical tradition. What I see here with Joseph Smith's epistemology is very much a kind of a fusion of the two. Trust you have a relationship with heaven, and you're participating in priesthood. If you can construe priesthood as not as this little status symbol you get from having a position in church, but rather a relationship with the divine intelligence, the way that that divine intelligence teaches you is not just through a priori deduction and reasoning, but also through a posteriori. You get off your butt and you try it. You participate in reality. And what it does is it gives you an anchor to actually put all of these ideas into reality. So, and that's where you get the language of color, sense. I see. It's tangible. When Nephi is experiencing his vision with the angel is giving him information, but he's grounding it in something tangible. Then he's grounding it in what's going to happen to his descendants. He's bridging heaven and earth. He's grounding it. So I think the way that angels teach is just that. They're very empirical. They'll take these ideas that are beyond your grasp and ground it in something that is testable, something that you can actually see and perceive. And when you can see and perceive something, when there's a basis for that, you can communicate that knowledge with other people. You're using it's, and so to go back, it's not just a mystical association I have with heaven, so therefore trust me because I have this mystical connection. It is a connection that I can use reason, and I can show you the connections. I can show you how this works, and so you don't have to take my word for it that my connection is heavens and the angels are what I'm learning from the angels is true, and you just have to take my word for it on faith. But you can see it for yourself. It's testable. Does that kind of make sense? Am I I'm trying to am I wrong? Am I mistaken in my thinking here about how angels operate? That they are testable. They ground things in trying and testing and a posteriori conclusion and a posteriori trials.
Yeah, I think you're connecting the ideas together with your language, which is good. And
Yeah.
I wanted to make one, because I forgot to say this, but I was going to say this. I think one of the reasons why this is the case and what Joseph is trying to get us to see here is actually in his description, because he says, test the quality of metals without a criterion, or point out the movements of the planetary system without a knowledge of astronomy. Like those are really, really complex things that he just labeled, which like you can gloss over that, but those are complicated, complex systems that you have to not just be able to regurgitate with your mouth. You have to actually know what you're doing in order to actually talk about those things and relay any of that to someone. And so those are examples, but then here are the description, or sorry, here's the list of things that we need to be able to do. So if Satan should appear as one in glory, who can tell his color, which I actually think that means more vibe, and more about like the general vibe, the appearance, or the the energy of stuff, like that kind of thing, which we could get into that, but that's how I'm kind of interpreting that. His signs, those are some actions. Those are some actions, and like, so we're already talking about really abstract things already that again you need to be participating with. His appearance, again, you're gonna have to be able to see the actual like physical or spiritual form of which he's appearing as. His glory, again, kind of another abstract thing, because that I think that is correlated more with intelligence, more with perhaps the devil is a better scriptorian than us. Like we need to be able to tell apart his glory, right? And then, or what is the manner of his manifestation? How does he appear? And all of these things combined, like these are really complex things that you have to be participating in order to recognize even any of those, because those are extremely abstract things that are complicated processes that are like the ones that he just glossed over and just and listed as examples of participation in order to be able to discern.
Remember when I talked about conceptual bundling? Part of light's role when you are entering into any given field like chemistry, astronomy, from the layman who's looking from the outside in, it all looks like a heterogeneous mass of confusion. It just all looks like the same. But when you take those disciplines and you apply a light onto it, you're able to differentiate. You're able to unpack the generalizations, unpack the conceptual bundling, and you're able to see everything in their particular constituents. And that's why it's a color. Like I said, kids, when they're born premature, they just see a boom and buzz and mess of confusion with their sense data. But as they grow up, they're able to differentiate mom from the couch, cat from dog. And it is perceptible. You're able to actually differentiate. It's not a heterogeneous massive confusion, but things become discernible as you participate, as you gain more light. It's real. Taylor, your hand is up as well. You have things to add or questions to counter?
Yeah, no, I think what you guys have shared works perfectly with what I was going to share too. It reminds me of, I don't know if it was part 1 or part 2 of the Holy Order that Denver gave, but I remember him talking about this very same principle of discerning and how it takes time and experiences beyond the veil in order to learn to be able to discern false spirits from true spirits. And I think if I remember right, the way that he had explained it was the head of the Holy Order has had enough experience beyond the veil, enough experiences where the devil has tried to deceive them and they've been able to learn from that, etc., that they're able to then do exactly what you were describing, Caden, not just say, oh, I've had these experiences, therefore just take my word for it, but they're able to come and teach, kind of like Joseph, others, other people here, how to discern, how what the correct order is, so that they can practice themselves and learn to discern for themselves as well. And I think that shows how important it is for the Holy Order to be on earth, etc. Because if without the Holy Order, you're not going to be able to, nobody's going to be able to sort through the mass of data that comes from heaven, because we're all, like you were saying, like premature infants. We're bombarded by it, and so we can't, even trying our very best, there's no way to go through it, and eventually you're going to be deceived. And I think that's what's happened with a lot of religions that we see, today. They don't have the Holy Order, and therefore they've fallen victim to a false spirit here or there or wherever. So
I like how you bring up the Holy Order person. I think you're describing one of the characteristics of someone who's actually been from heaven. That they teach not by saying rely on my word for it, but here's all the facts. Look at it yourself and come to your own conclusions. But if you look at the premises of my argument here, it will testify. It will make good sense. I like how you bring that up because it reminds me of, in the triangularity parable, Denver invokes Galileo. And why did Galileo get condemned by the Catholic Church? Well, he made a telescope and looked at the moons of Saturn. And the reason why the Catholic Church they did not like the moons of Saturn, other planetary bodies, is because in their view of the cosmos, it had to be 7. There had to only be 7 planets. If there's more than 7 planets, that goes against the Bible. It's not perfect. But he just discovered these other objects in the sky, the moons. But the test that Galileo had was look and see. Look through my telescope. You can see it. It's right there. And I like how Denver sneaks that into his parable, because he's laying out on a epistemological flag here. How can you come to know, and how can you recognize a true messenger? True messengers who are actually conveying truth will not say, take my word for it, because I have this abstract knowledge that I've conceptualized and you just need to trust me, or that I've communed with the heavens, or that I'm some philosopher king in Plato's Republic, but rather come and see yourself. Look, just like the angel does for Nephi. You can use your eyes, look and see yourself. There you go. So I like that, because I push that up against a lot of false teachers these days who will not have that sort of rigor in their way of in their pedagogy, in their way of teaching. They don't make things discernible. They don't teach you actual things. They don't show you the facts to look at. Rather, they just regurgitate catchphrases in a lot of evangelical churches. They just regurgitate things to parrot back in political jargon, in the political space. You just toe the party line. Let's hear from, sorry, Catherine raised her hand because she hasn't talked much. We'll go with Catherine first, then Adam.
I'm listening a lot. To go with what Taylor was just saying, and then Adam was saying with regards to music, being an educator of various topics, and especially music.
Are you a teacher, or Catherine?
I'm an educator, and especially music. So
awesome. Okay, I didn't know that about you.
I also perform, sing, whatever. So I love what is being brought up right now with regards to discerning a true messenger. I think of the Book of Mormon, where we have personal ascension stories, and so that we can learn how to ascend to God. I like how, especially with music, the challenge of teaching a whole different language, especially with it has math aspects. It has to so the student can interpret and then learn how to play beautiful music, render beautiful music. What Taylor was saying with regards to, you can tell a messenger by the messenger is going to teach you how. The Lord teaches us how to come into the presence of the Father. And I think these are key points with regards to discerning false spirits, the importance of the message, the importance of what is being represented. So I just wanted to second witness, or say, yes, I'm nodding my head over here.
Thank you, Catherine. All right, Adam.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly connect what Taylor was saying back to the lectures on faith from a true messenger, as the premise, the core premise of, we already know that Joseph is a man sent by God to declare the restoration and to to do that. And then, of course, we've got Denver following in Joseph's footsteps and kind of picking up the pieces. And so in a book like A Man Without Doubt, it's a lot more accessible to understand the reasoning behind the premise of Joseph giving us lectures on faith. It was because there was a crisis in the early days of the church where they weren't really seeking, the individuals were not seeking for themselves. They weren't participating themselves. They were just expecting Joseph and company to do everything. And so Joseph responds with that, and with the failure the failure of the ratifying of God when bestowing the charge to get the priesthood to the elders. He responds by writing the lectures in order to help orient them to the most essential basics, which is how I view the lectures, which is how to recognize God. And although there are a lot of like descriptions and descriptors in the lectures, there is also a lot of just kind of describing fundamentals of like physics and things like that. Like it's more about trying to help make the connections and then giving you the charge again to go after it and to participate to the highest degree you can by sacrificing. And oh, by the way, this is how Christ was able to attain to the status and attain the position that he was able to do so. And so he kind of lays it all out in an I believe an easy to digest way. But I'm not saying that in a sense like it's easy. It's more like it's simply laid out, but it's going to take you practice and participation. And you've got to integrate each of the things in the lectures into your understanding so that you can be oriented the right way. Because again, that was what he identified as the problem. This was the solution to fix that problem. And so I think just because if we accept the core premise that he is a true messenger, he cuts right through all the bullshit immediately and just jumps right to, okay, here is how you need to recognize God. You need to understand his character, perfections, and attributes, and you need to know, who he is, what the object of faith is supposed to be on, and how faith actually operates by sacrifice, and what that actually means, and to the fullest extent that it is possible. So it's like he just cuts right through and gets right to the nuts and bolts of it, and I believe that is one of the marks. One of the tests is can someone get right to the exact problem because they already know. The best kind of teacher, especially with learning music, is one who can identify exactly what is missing in someone who might already be proficient at their instrument or at the language. The best teacher can recognize where they might be lacking and then give them things to practice to fill in that space. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. He's been around.
Okay.
Knows, right?
I like how you mean that the fruits of a correct teacher. To use the language of logic, a good teacher can get a student to check their premises. They don't just refute their conclusion, but they will dig in to the nuts and bolts. The nuts and bolts of anything are the premises by which you build up your argument from. If you have a false premise, you're going to have a false conclusion. So a good teacher will go in and correct the premise so you can have a correct conclusion. A lot of problems, I think, with our religious faith and learning is we only want the conclusions. We don't want to have our premises checked. We don't want to engage in the how, as Catherine was saying. The how is important, and that's what Joseph Smith is doing. Is he's showing us the how, but in order to examine the how and engage in the process, you have to correct your individual premises, and that's a lot of work. That's tedious. That's boring. I think, and that takes time and careful and ponderous thought to contemplate. I think our mistake in a lot of in our religious expectations is that we want the beefy whole enchilada of God up front. We want the glory. We want the experience without engaging in the process of checking your premises. The reason why Joseph Smith and the angel that appears to Nephi and Christ to the brother of Jared, they almost seem pedantic. They're looking at every single object is they want the initiate, the believer, to slow down. You're not entering into a relationship with me just so you can reap the conclusions, so that you can reap the heavenly gift. You need to slow down, look for yourself, understand the basics and fundamentals so that you can participate in with your free volition. The problem with a lot of people with religious convictions, which I like here, because it says here, thousands of people have felt the influence of this terrible power and baneful effects. Long pilgrimages have been undertaken, penances endured, and pain, misery, and ruin have followed in their train. Nations have been convulsed, kingdoms overthrown, providence laid waste, and blood, carnage, and dissolution, and habilance in which it has been clothed. The Turks, the Hindus, the Jews, the Christians, the Indians, and all nations have been deceived, imposed upon, and injured through the mischievous effects of false spirits. What I think a false spirit will give to you is a conclusion without its premise. They'll give you the end result. They'll bluff best up front without giving you the why, without examining the premises and the processes, the fundamentals. What a true messenger is trying to do is they want you to participate in what they have. But in order for you to be an actual participant, you have to do the hard work of actually understanding for yourself, getting your premises right, getting your foundation correct. Is that jiving with you guys? My language matching up with yours, Adam? Awesome. I just think a lot of mischief happens in the world when you have false teachers just offering you their conclusions without imposing upon the initiate and imposing upon the believer actual work that they need to do themselves. Taylor, your hand came back up.
Oh, that's my bad.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Caden,
Well,
if everybody's got the same premise, that doesn't everybody views it the same way, right? Everyone's got the framework of it, correct? But that doesn't mean like everyone has their own unique experience with that framework still, right?
yeah, everyone has their unique participation, but if you all have the same premises, you logically you'll come to the same conclusion.
Right.
Yeah. Where are you going with that question? Why is that? Why do you bring up that question?
Well, just I don't know. I'm just thinking through my head, like, and I don't mean to assume what you're saying, and I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly too, because it sounds a little locked in. It seems
Yeah.
very like blah, 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 like very intense, and I think that the way that I've understood like the gospel itself to be is a lot more individualized. It's a lot more personalized and less uniform in that sense. Which is why there is that Spirit of Christ in all things through all things, which that's the premise that we share, but that doesn't mean that our experiences are going to be the same. It also doesn't mean that our lives are going to be oriented to live the same things, but we are going to be living the same way.
No,
I
would absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, okay, cool. Just want to make sure I understood what you're
saying.
saying.
What I want to clarify though is I think there is because it used the word locked in, rigid, and it seems rigid. I think when you get to the base of reality, the core axioms, those are rigid. That's why they're a bedrock and not sandy. Now, how you're going to build your house on that bedrock will be different, but you need to have a bedrock to build upon. And so what we're doing here, and I think what Joseph Smith is doing here, is we're trying to get to the bedrock. What is truth? And I think at the base of reality is either this or that. It is rigid at the core. But how you grow up from that, there is a lot of variability, and that's going to be your life. So
that's the difficult part in fellowshipping with each other and like that kind of thing, because what we have with our perception is the ability to view things, but we don't necessarily have that structure or framework to view the way. You know what I mean? So anyways,
when you say to view the way to, I think would it be correct to say the way? Are you saying using the word the way? The way is the way to be.
The way, yeah, the way to be. State of being, way to be, rather than the state of doing.
Okay, is the way to be? So we're understanding each other correctly. Is the way to be absolute? Like, is that governed by an absolute principle that is unchangeable?
Well, yes, because the covenant is the way to be. That's the way to be. And the covenant of Christ, the covenant that we have, those are the baseline structures, like you're saying, that's the rock. So yeah, there is absolutely a set way to be. Yeah. But that, like, I don't know, like everybody has their own skills. Everybody exists in their own realm, and that can be misleading to make it makes it seem a lot more confused and and all of that than it actually is. And so, like, to the outside viewer, for us example, like for example, group, we understand the premise that we're working with, and it makes sense. We believe it. But if someone were to look from the outside perspective, they would be like, oh my gosh, this is so confusing. Like, you guys are like over here, you're over here, you're over here. But like, we're like, yeah, like there are those aspects, but we do have this steady rock that we
Yeah.
all sit on, that we're all resting. So anyways,
Well, I guess then to tie what you're saying back to the broader theme of what we're discussing with Try the Spirits, that bedrock, we have to make sure that bedrock is actually bedrock and not sandy foundation. You can call that bedrock the governing principle that guides our life, and that can have different expressions that are particular to the individual life, but every individual Christian is governed by that absolute principle of Christ. Now, what happens where it gets problematic is when you start confusing, you start diluting that absolute principle, you start conceptually bundling other ideologies into that absolute principle. For example, so hear me out on this one. In political discourse today, the issues are less economical and more about culture. If you were to take a poll of what was on people's minds back in the 60s and the 50s, it was more about inequality of income and this and that. Today, it's a lot about gender identity and racial identity. And this was upset to the Marxists, because the Marxists wanted their revolution of the proletariat, that's the lower class, to upthrow the upper class, and it never happened. And the Marxists were wondering, well, why has that never happened? Well, because Marxism is a theory that's so abstract and intellectual that the common man couldn't latch onto it. So then the new left were like, well, we're going to have a revolution. We got to make it more concrete. We got to get people pissed off about something that's not so intellectual and abstract in principle, but something that they can tangibly see. Race and gender, race and sexuality. Let's deal in concretes. And so they infuse this, because you don't need to think in abstraction, in principles, to identify with a Christian ethos or a Marxist ethos. Even though Marx is wrong, you don't need to be intellectual to think that deeply. Instead, you can just judge people based on the color of their skin or their sexuality or their gender. And that's a much more ideology to sell to the masses. And that has taken off. And so what has happened here with the people who are divided on race, intersectionality, and gender is they have made supreme an ideology of race, not an ideology of principles. And they have made that their bedrock foundation, which they're going to build upon. And that's going to crumble. And that's very superficial. And they have made that their most supreme God. That's idolatry. When
I
idolatry
totally
is
agree.
when you told yes. And so as Christians, what we're trying to do, because you can be a Christian, but also be of a different race. You can be any ethnicity, black or white, male or female. I don't think you can transgress the sexual divide thing with gender identity. I think that's too fundamental. But you can be of any social class, socioeconomic. That is not the supreme thing. The supreme theme is this Christian ethos, this Christian identity in Christ. That is fundamental. But the danger is when we start letting ideologies, oppressive narratives, or victimhood narratives, whatever or maybe if you are, say you're a therapist, or say you're a lawyer. I'm using Denver's Stephanie. Say you're a philosopher or an engineer, and you decide to make that the core of your gospel, and you start projecting that as the base rock. You're in messy waters, because that is not the ultimate truth. Your profession as a lawyer, your profession as a therapist, are ought to be manifestations of this core foundation you're building upon. The danger is when you start conceptually bundling that into your bedrock.
Yeah.
Catherine,
Yeah,
did you have your
and
hand
those
up?
are.
Oh wait, no, go ahead,
And I
John.
just want to say that's what I was saying. You explained it so much better than me, but that's the thing that I was saying. The thing is the things we can perceive, like you said, race, identity, those kind of things, and the way of being is Christ. So yeah.
Yeah, the way of being is not just you can't. It's not something you can see. Like, okay, let's go back to what we talked about. Joseph Smith being able to have this color language.
Mm.
When you're governed, I think when you are governed by a higher ideal, like the Spirit of Christ, you don't see race. You don't see those superficial qualities. You're actually able to see the color of someone's spirituality because you can see the
Mm-hmm.
spirit that governs them. But when you are not connected with that priesthood, all you're going to see is someone's racial identity, sexual identity, political ideology, because that's the lower game you're playing, man. And that's what you're blinded to see. So part of this priesthood, part of this gospel is to be able to see the essence of someone's spirit.
In a
Yeah.
way, you could say feeling their essence, like feeling their kindness, and like I don't know, that there is a
You can tap
sense
into their
that we have.
authenticity. You can feel it. I
Yeah.
think you can feel it, but I think it's also this. It is, but you
It's
can
based
feel it,
on
but when you reflect
information.
upon it, it's discernible. It's discernible.
Yeah, exactly.
I like
Yeah,
the, I like the word going on along with John. I like the word resonate. I find when I see the godly or the God in another person, I'm resonating with that person. We're to be in harmony with God. We're to be. It's like a dance, to be in step with the Lord. And so I love to use the word resonate because that's how I feel when I'm with a person that is living the best they can with the Lord, and we're both resonating with each other. In it's not a commonality. It's a higher language. It's a higher language that we're engaging in if we're truly understanding. And John was mentioning, as part of this community, but not all of our Bob was very much, and he was first since 2008 resonating with more truths, and then I came on board about 2015. But I find myself having abandoned the tradition, but being very much alone in the journey with regards to circle of influence. Not a lot of individuals are identifying with my understandings at this time. So, what am I trying to say with all this? I had other comments, but we went on to a different track.
So the people you resonate with are on the same. We can call it epistemological foundation. They're on the same bedrock.
But like John was pointing out, we are so different. We have so many differences, and what I find in this world and what we've all understood is that differences can be a negative connotation, when actuality differences should be, that's who we are. We're individual, we're unique, but we can resonate because we are all interconnected with the mind of God. Our spirits are interconnected, and that's what we want to resonate with. And that's what I joy, even meeting with this fellowship this morning, that's what I joy in coming to an understanding and relating this way, when I don't feel in situations because they don't have the perception, they don't have the again, I'm not explaining this very well.
I think you're making a lot of sense, Catherine.
No, you.
Pardon?
No, keep going,
I said I think you're making a lot of sense.
Oh, thank you. I have siblings who are still LDS tradition, and they recognize that I have love for the Lord and faith, but why have I just abandoned that ship and taken my ladder off that ship? There's no understanding because they're not resonating with where I'm at this time. I don't expect them to. I give grace, but I'm grateful for the opportunities to resonate more with individuals who are in our differences. We're coming together with understanding the Lord more. Sermon on the Mount is how to be, the covenant. And I love to resonate more with individuals who are trying, again, we're not better. We're not better than others. I was just reading in my studies that the difference is God's presence. He's no respecter of persons. It's God's presence that is the difference. We're no better. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, there seems to be this like level, and there's this like rock down here. And those who don't have the foundation of the rock can't see down to the rock, it seems. And like it seems and I'm totally assuming I don't know anything about your family. But in that dynamic, they're probably not able to see that deep level of like, no, like I've found peace. Like this is love. This is joy. Like this is where I am resting. That's where I want to exist. And they're looking at the things of it. Oh my gosh, you're not going to LDS church anymore. You're not going to the temple. You're not, reading the same scriptures as me. Like there's, but the baseline, the feeling, the reality of what being is, that's the important part. Love, peace, kindness, like those core principles, charity, those things, the baseline is.
When you're enriched with so much more, and you desire that for those that you love the most, again, you can point to Christ, but they have to be willing to come and drink. And when we're stuck in paradigms that we think we know, that's where we're at fault.
So to that last point, when you're stuck in paradigms that you think you know that you're at fault, I think the remedy or the antidote for that is it's this virtue of humility. It's being able to question your axioms, question your bundled conceptions, your bundled concepts. Because I think even though we can experience transcendence, I'm pretty sure all of us here have tasted the divine at some point in our life. We're always at danger of being led into temptation or having different ideologies, different belief systems sneak their way into the way we think and bundle themselves in our psyche and lock us into a rigid way of thinking. Just like your LDS family who may be judging of that they can't comprehend you, it's because they're viewing reality at this superficial level of analysis, and they're not engaging in the thought processes and questioning self-examination required to get down to that base foundation. To get down to the base foundation, you have to self-reflect. You have to question your belief systems. You have to question the spirits that govern your life. And in that questioning, you're able to try the spirits, separate the bad, keep the good, and in that act of praying, in that act of questioning, it sinks your roots deeper into the foundation of Christ. But we're always in danger. Like I said, we're always in danger of letting other spirits, other ideologies bundle themselves into. And so it's an ongoing act of discernment. In order to keep that, you have to keep a questioning, wondrous, childlike awe for reality that's always questioning, that's always not accepting things just to float over you as a heterogeneous mass, but to always be looking for the gold in the muck. I think
first, just one last comment with regards to that. We have to find the need. If you don't understand that there's a need, there's not the seeking. And that's where I was at with the LDS tradition. I didn't see the need. I had it all. So again, the elect can be deceived, and I love that our understandings that there is a personal responsibility within each one of us. There's a personal responsibility with all of this.
Well, can I talk about real quick about that deception thing? Adam and I were talking about this because Adam has parents who are kind of superstar rock stars in the covenant Christianity. And when I came into covenant Christianity, my story is, I have a very long story of how I came to these truths while on my mission, and I left while on my mission. But when I came back out of my mission, I even know who Denver Snuffer was, and I got baptized based on hearing the message. And I kind of became a poster child for covenant Christianity. And what struggled with is I had this really interesting relationship in those early days, this honeymoon phase with Jesus. But something occurred because I allowed the applause, the praise of the culture of the remnant to conceptually bundle themselves into my foundation with Christ, and that blinded me for many years. I became delusional because I was allowing the testimony and the applause of them, the culture that I somehow found myself in when I decided to convert, to bundle themselves into me. And so it wasn't until I think recently I've been able to kind of reflect on my life and disentangle a lot of those living for the applause of covenant, being the poster boy of covenant Christianity for a few years there. I had to untangle that and get back to my foundation, and that was some work. And I think we always have to do that work. So that's probably a good place to stop. We'll read verse 6 next time. We didn't get to Revelation. Next time, I think that'll be the core thing we talk about, is what is Revelation. Really good topic, because that's kind of discussed in the next 2 verses. But did you guys feel that was a good discussion? Learned a lot, or didn't learn a lot? You feel confused, or do you feel like you can discern things better now?
Great discussion.
Okay.
That was a good discussion, and I feel like we covered a lot of foundation and a lot of bedrock. And I would just suggest that next time maybe we don't really try to start with like a summary of what we did previously, and maybe just jump right in and see what we can add to.
Okay, well,
from
yeah,
this
we'll jump right in
Right,
next
yeah.
time. I'm assuming people who, if people are going to watch this recording, they can watch the previous video, so we don't need to summarize. Okay,
Works for me.
good feedback. All right, then I'll hit stop and record. Thank you, people watching the recording, for watching. God bless.